All right, guys, we have some technological issues going on today. I'm not sure how much they're going to affect what we're doing. I think I've got most everything up. For some reason, the speakers are not working for YouTube, so the video I wanted to show is not going to be available. But if that's the worst thing that happens today, that'll be a true joy. I was actually watching the video from last year when I did this presentation, and they were having all kinds of technical issues with this particular computer, and the levels of frustration that I experienced in that particular video were just beyond anything that I can possibly explain. I've had some scenarios in the past where technology has just not wanted to work with me, and one of those goes back to the pandemic when I was trying to teach in the student union off of a laptop computer in the Georgia room. Yeah, that was like the most miserable experience of my entire life, was trying to get through that. But this was close to it. This was close to it, and so I'm good with technology working for today. I think it's ironic that I complain about technology enough, and then I'm teaching a technology class. Yeah, so there's that. Today we're going to be talking about our first topic of basically 14 different topics that we're going to cover in this course. They are interrelated, so it's not really 14 separate topics, but 14 topics. This is our introduction to IT governance. And I threw the caveat out there at the beginning of the semester. These first few weeks, they are a bit dry. Today was dry. Next week, when we start on Monday and we start talking about IT standards, those are going to be dry. IT controls, has the word controls in it. You know it's going to be pretty dry. Just start with that. It actually does get a little bit better in week 4. That doesn't sound like it's going to be good. It's testing IT controls, and you'd be like, okay, that's got to be the worst. It's actually not that bad because it's hands-on. So some of it's a little bit tedious because well, I won't go into it, but we'll say some of it's a little bit tedious, some of it's kind of interesting. The fun stuff starts kind of in week 6. We start talking about cybersecurity and move on from there. That being said, I do think you need to be acclimated to this format because these are critical thinking questions. Some of these are questions about just the content, but they get, as you can see, when I ask you about something and say, define this, it's not just defining in a vacuum. I do want you to be able to utilize this in some other capacity later on, make some value judgments. So that's kind of be the goal of these particular activities, to learn the information and then try to glean why it's important. Like, why is it relevant? Why is it something that we're talking about in this particular course? IT governance is kind of the setting. It's the umbrella on which pretty much everything else will fall. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we're going to structure IT governance. I do guess there's going to be some variety in some of the answers, and that's fine. I expect that to be the case, just simply because of the lack of consistency and information out there about this. But we're going to come to a kind of what I believe that you should focus on, and those are going to be the things that you should take away from this particular discussion. So with respect to IT governance, one of the very first questions, or the very first question I asked, is define IT governance. Okay, and I've gone back and forth on how I approach this particular problem, because I wrote the very first iteration of this exercise. I won't say that this is the same exercise that I originally wrote for this course, but it's a variant of what this exercise was. So the very first exercise I wrote for this, I had a very strong impression of what I believed IT governance would be. I thought, this is very easy to find. I don't know why I bother asking this question. It's pretty straightforward. And then I looked at the definition, and I was wrong. Okay, my definition for IT governance was dead wrong. So here's what I want to do for this first question. And trust me when I say, group leaders, you will have your opportunity to share and compete. But I want to start out, I want to talk about what I think are some perspectives on IT governance and kind of set the stage for everything else we're going to talk about. So if I define IT governance, you may have like a couple sentences. You can kind of look and see where I'm at here. Like on this first one, I've got like 3 paragraphs of information about define IT governance, because there's a lot of detail on this. So you don't need to write down all these 3 paragraphs, but there are going to be some really important takeaways that we're going to take for this. So first of all, we're going to talk about what some of the information is in the CIO Wiki. So the CIO Wiki says IT governance, or information technology governance, is a process used to monitor and control information technology capability decisions in an attempt to assure the delivery of value to key stakeholders in an organization. All right. Now, again, you don't need to write every single word of that down. If you did, congratulations, your typing is much faster than mine is. All right. But let's go ahead and let's talk about some of the things that are intuitive, and then let's talk about something that's not intuitive. All right. This is a process used to monitor and to control key information technology. Would you say that that's fairly consistent with what your definition would be? Yeah, I would say that probably everybody should have a definition that's pretty consistent with that. But then it says something in an attempt to ensure the the delivery of value to key stakeholders in an organization. Now, there's a couple of very, very profound statements that are very relevant in that particular blurb, that particular part of the sentence. All right. First of all, it says stakeholders. All right. What is a stakeholder? Somebody holds a stake, Dr. Lawrence. Yeah. A stakeholder. So stakeholders, can we say a shareholder is a stakeholder? Can we say a stakeholder is a shareholder? Maybe. Okay. Stakeholder is much broader than just shareholders. Okay. When we talk about shareholders, those are the organization, they are definitely stakeholders. Are there stakeholders other than shareholders? Yeah. Some examples: employees, customers, vendors, governmental agencies. These are all people who have a vested interest in IT. The way that I think about it, the example that I gave last year when I was talking about this, let's say you talk to your vendors and say, we had an IT outage, we're not going to be able to pay you this month. All right. Do you think your vendors are going to be satisfied with that particular response? So you understand, you're not a stakeholder in this organization. Okay. So it doesn't matter if we pay you or not. Yeah. If you stop paying your vendors, you probably will not be in business for very long. So that's going to be an example of why it's important for this, important to stakeholders as a broad context, rather broad category, rather than just shareholders. But the most important word in this entire statement, the entire definition, has to do with value. Now, if I were to ask you one word to describe IT governance, would that have been the word that you gave me? No, it probably been a blur. It probably been a mishmash. You probably would have been 3 words, but you put it in one. I don't know. Yeah, but that was not the word I was looking for when I was looking for this definition. Okay, I was looking for something because I'm an auditor. All right, I was looking for a different word. Okay, a 4-letter word that begins with the letter R. Does anybody know which one I tend to focus on and I tend to anchor on? Risk. That's the one that I thought was going to appear, and it's nowhere in this definition. So this is something that was kind of profound to me, and I want to talk a little bit more about that. But we'll get to that. I'm going to share a little bit more about the definitions. Okay. The objective of IT governance is to ensure the delivery of business results, not IT system performance, nor IT risk management. All right. Well, they just answered my question. It's not. It's basically about the end results. The goal is not going to be just about what these ancillary areas are. It talks about all the big picture, the big picture items. Now it reports the notion that IT is an end in itself. To the contrary, IT governance is about decisions that have an impact on business value. All right. So this leads to an interesting question that I want to pose to everybody in this room. All right. So basically, we've come to our first conclusion, our first and most important conclusion for right now to this point is that IT governance is about delivering business value, which I think that doesn't seem very profound, but from everything that you've learned about accounting in the past 3 to 4 years, however long you've been here, that's actually a pretty strong statement about IT governance. All right. But does the fact that they deliver value, does that mean that you can have differing objectives within the same IT governance system? That you can have different goals, I guess I should say. It's possible. It's possible. Okay. So we know that avoiding risk is one of our goals within an IT system, but also maximizing value. Can we say that risk and value can kind of contradict one another? Yeah. Can you find a situation where maybe you think that you're going to maximize your value, but it's subject to massive risk? Yeah, it's called Las Vegas. Okay, it's called Las Vegas. It's going to a roulette wheel, it's spinning a roulette wheel. It says, if I win, I get massive value out of this. Okay, but you're looking at the upside and not looking at the fact that risk actually contradicts that value. Has anybody heard of the term expected value? Expected value is like if any given situation, whether you're not what your possible or your predicted outcome is going to be, and pretty much everything that's due in Las Vegas has negative expected value, by the way. But yeah, I did have a situation. I don't think anybody was with me in a class, but I had a situation where I went to a conference in Las Vegas, and this is a story that I like to tell. It doesn't have anything to do, well, it's kind of sideways relationship to this, but I was at a conference in Las Vegas. Maybe a few people who were in 221 with me had heard this story, but I was at a conference, and on Saturday, instead of going to the conference, I bailed out and I went gambling. Okay, because that's what you do when you're in Las Vegas. And I played Texas Hold'em because I used to play Texas Hold'em very, very frequently when I was in college. And so I actually did pretty well at Texas Hold'em. After about an hour, I was at $100 up. And my brother has this inane theory. Says you always bet on 28 black on roulette. Every single time in Las Vegas, said put 20 on 28 black. I'd been to Las Vegas like about 10 times before this particular visit. I did exactly what he told me, and I had won 0 times. So I said, you know what? I'm $100 up. I might as well try it. So I put $20, one spin. Okay. I just walked up to the roulette table. So $20, 28 black, and it hit. Okay. $720 off of that one bet. Okay. And it's just kind of like, yeah. Was that maximizing value? Yes. Was that maximizing value with respect to risk? Absolutely not. It was a stupid thing to do. Yet it had a positive outcome. All right. So I'm not going to say that you should do that. It's like, well, Dr. Barnes is now telling us we should all go to Vegas and bet on 28 black. No, I'm not. Okay. I'm saying it happened one time. And if I continue to do that over the long run, I'd be negative. It just happened to be that this one instance hit. It's a good story, but I'm not encouraging you all to try to follow my example. All right. So we do know that the information systems can have differing objectives, particularly with respect to what value is. So one of the things that I think is important to note is that the objective about governance is about delivery of risk-optimized business value. Not just the delivery of risk-optimized business value, but when we talk about delivery of value, it's not just value in and of itself. We can deliver value by saying, all right, well, what we're going to do is we're going to take all of our money in the business and we're going to go bet on 28 black. All right. That would definitely not be a positive outcome over the long run. You may actually have some hits where you have some lucky situations like mine, but risk optimized business value tells you that we have to weigh against the risks that are associated with the organization in order to be able to deliver value. So risk is a component of value. We can actually make a note of that. It is not value in and of itself. It's something that's a constraint to value. All right. So one can argue that trust results in more business value, no doubt, but the fact remains that this is a means, and to that end, it must be recognized independently as a motivation of IT governance. In a sense, IT governance acts upon the old adage, trust but verify. Has anybody ever heard that term, that statement before, trust but verify? What does that mean to you all? What does that mean? It means that I want to believe that what you're saying is correct, but I need evidence to support that conclusion. Now, this is going to be the first one of these, by the way, this semester. You will hear this all year from me, and I'm going to tell you right now, I don't do this to cause trauma or don't do this out of preference, but I'm going to refer back to something I said in 417, and this will happen a lot. I want to clarify. Do I do this just to bring up 417 and say this class is severe? So no, because it's a class I teach, okay? So that's why I bring up this particular course. But trust but verify, we talked about corroboration. What was corroboration again? Is basically providing evidence to support something that we found a conclusion on. Remember, we had an observation and inquiry, and we said those are pieces of evidence, but they're not pieces of evidence that are sufficient in and of themselves. So we have to gather additional evidence to support that. This is the same idea, is that when we get information from the information or within our information system, we can't accept that information at face value. We have to actually verify the information is accurate and going to provide value for the organization. So there is definitely a risk element with respect to IT governance, but in and of itself, IT governance is more about the overall delivery of business value. Or as I like to say, kind of my ultimate conclusion in this situation is the delivery of risk optimized business value. And I will say on a side note, if you live your life by risk optimized value, if that's your goal, if you basically say, I'm going to optimize all value according to risk, it's probably not a lot of fun to do that, but you will actually end up being better off in the long run to do that, okay? Just simply because you will be consistently considering all the risks that you're subject to. That is not to say that you can't occasionally go to Vegas and put $20 on 28 black. If you want to do that one time, or in my case, 11 times is fine, okay? But yeah, don't do it every single time you go to, or you go to a roulette wheel. All right, so the IT Governance Institute, which is ACCT, did anybody see that in the blog, say ACCT IT Governance Institute, say, why is ISACA the acronym for IT Governance Institute? Well, that is their name, okay? That is not the original acronym. It used to be called something different. I don't remember what the original stands for. It's like Information System and Controls Architecture or something like that. Association. No, sorry. Yeah, association. But they changed the name to IT Governance Institute, but didn't change the abbreviation. So that's kind of weird. They say they define IT governance as follows: leadership, organizational structures and processes to ensure that organization's IT sustains and extends the organization's strategy and objectives. So basically, we can kind of compartmentalize this, all these definitions, and we say the delivery of risk optimized value, or sorry, the processes structures within the organization to deliver risk optimized business value, all right, or something to that end. I'm not going to ask you to give me a verbatim definition of it. That's not something I'm looking for, but I do want you to understand that there are some important components that we need to be aware of. IT governance is definitely going to be about information technology, because that's part of the definition, and it's going to be about the value that it can provide to the organization. To that end, everything else is fairly subjective. Okay, so the next question I'm going to bring up, so I did ask you to identify the 3 most widely recognized IT governance frameworks. And by the way, I recognize that this was a challenge because there were a lot of them listed, all right? So let's go ahead and let's talk about the first 2 that should be easy to identify. 2 of these should be on everybody's list, okay? So let's see, what's our first group? First, I think Matt, you were the first group. So so I have 2, and I'm gonna kind of prompt you on this. One is 5 letters and one is 4 letters. So what are those 2?
So we've got COBIT and ITIO.
Yes. Okay. So COBIT, control objectives. I don't remember what COBIT stands for. Core objectives for information regulated technology. Which, if you look at the actual title of it, of what COBIT is, it should be COBIT, which is weird. I don't know why they said COBIT. And then we have ITIL, Information Technology Infrastructure Library. Okay. Then we have a third one, which that third one always varies between every single one. And I tried to delineate it. I said, okay, the most widely recognized governance frameworks. And actually, if you look in the blog and go down sufficiently and far enough, it talks about those 3. All right. So go down here, and it actually has a table of contents. So let's go ahead and go to IT governance frameworks. We have ITIL COBIT, and then we have ISO 27000 series. All right. So this is the third of those, the ISO 27000 series, or ISO 27002. The reason I call it the 27000 series is we will actually see 27002, we'll see 27001. These are all a set of standards within a series that accomplish the same objective. So that's how you should think about it, is the whole series is what we're concerned about. There were probably some others that you came up with. The 2 that kind of came up another piece that I've heard before. A lot of people talk about the Calder-Moore IT governance frameworks, which I'll be honest, I have no idea what that is. I've never ever studied it. It's just kind of listed up there. And then one that came up and I heard a lot of people talking about is the ISO 38500 series. Why this is not one of the more widely recognized ones, I honestly don't have a good answer for you. This is one that I think that actually should be probably explored a little bit more. It's not currently tested on the CPA exam, which is why I don't focus on it. But it is definitely it does have a relationship to IT governance because it's the international IT governance standard. The only reason I think that maybe it's not that case is or not that focused is because it has not been widely adopted. It's something that has been in existence, but people have not adopted it. So that's why it's not recognized as a governance framework. So what I want you to come up with is I want you to come up with these 3 right here. Trust me when I say that we'll have a lot of exploration of these 3. In fact, we're going to talk about the definitions of these 3 in just a second. But these 3 are going to be our linchpins for this course. All right, moving forward. According to the CIO Wiki, what are the 5 domains of IT governance? And then we also got number 4. What are the other 5? Because they're the same 5 domains. Now, I don't want you to list those out, but did anybody notice any subtle differences between the 3 different sources and the domains that they listed? Yeah, they put it in a different order. Do you think that has any relevance whatsoever? Maybe, maybe not. I think that maybe you could make the argument that there's hierarchy there, but I think ultimately that's a loose argument. That's a loose argument. So we're going to come back to that because we do have a point where I want you all to define these, but I want you to have a list of those. For the most part, I think we can say that there's agreement between all of our sources. These are going to be the five domains that we're concerned about. All right. Now we're getting to the subjective questions. Now we're getting into the group questions where we're going to break things down a little bit further. So what is the difference between IT governance and corporate governance? So by saying that question, can we actually state that there's probably a difference here? Yes. And there's the difference that you had to research as a group, so I'm curious what your definition is. Sydney, what did your group say on this one?
Corporate governance and IT governance are similar. IT governance is an element or subset of corporate governance. Corporate governance oversees the entire structure. of the organization, whereas IT focuses on the technology.
Yes. So most important part of that definition is that IT governance is a subset of corporate governance. By the way, in your digging, you probably encountered a different terminology for corporate governance. Did anybody find a different way that corporate governance is expressed within the CIO wiki? They used a different term that was synonymous. Enterprise governance. Did anybody see that? Yeah. So the reason I bring that up is because that's going to be relevant to question number 6, because I'm going to say, how does IT governance relate to other governance areas in an organization? Enterprise governance, product development governance, and development governance. So I'm going to scroll here. I should have done a better job of making sure I knew exactly where this was. There we go. All right. So do you all find this diagram right here? So this diagram kind of explains this, but how do we interpret this diagram? So I'm going to call upon Holden. Holden, oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Try to say something, Holden. You may not be able to say anything simply because our speakers are not working here.
Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you. Fantastic. Okay, so what does your group come up with respect to the answer to question number 6?
We said IT governance is integrated with the other governance areas. So this integration enables informed decision-making regarding IT investments or optimizing utilization of IT resources.
Okay, good. So we can say that there's relationships between all of these areas right here, and these relationships are fairly intuitive, but they still need to be defined. All right. So 2 that we didn't really talk about, and we're not going to go into a lot of detail in this course about these, are going to be development governance and product development governance. Now, I was looking at this and I was trying to figure out how did they come up with these particular circles right here? Because this seems to be somewhat intuitive, but also somewhat nonsensical. Because when they say development governance, what is the development that they're probably referring to in this particular context? Organizational development, guidelines, development of routines and procedures. This would seem to be something that's on the subset on the scale of enterprise governance, but it seems to be a much smaller subset of that. Then we have product development, which is actually much larger than that, which I can agree that has some overlap with IT governance, but I would assume product development would be smaller than development governance as a whole. So my interpretation of this is a little bit off. Obviously, that is largely irrelevant for our purposes here, because all we really need to focus on is the relationship between enterprise governance and IT governance. So is it possible to state that these 2 are somewhat synonymous? I mean, we can say that that enterprise governance is larger than IT governance, and I think that's an accurate statement. I guess what I would say is that if you have one, you have to have the other. Would that be a fair statement? What type of organization do you think can exist without IT governance? You can have enterprise governance, even if it's informally stated, without IT governance, but you'd have to have a very specific type of business. What type of business would that be? A business without IT? Okay. What's that? Lemonade stand. Yeah, my example was the Mennonite store that's north of town. Okay. They probably have enterprise governance. Well, again, informally stated, it's like we're open until 5 o'clock. By the way, if you want to go to the Mennonite store, apparently it's pretty good prices there, but they're open like right till 5, and you can't get there after 5. So it's really, really challenging to get over there when you got a busy schedule. I don't know why I decided to tell you all that. All right. Anyway, so yeah, we can say that they have informal enterprise governance, but probably not a lot of IT governance because there's not a lot of information technology associated with that particular business. Now, that is obviously an extreme example. For most of the organizations that we're going to look at in this course, can we say that enterprise governance leads the fact that we're going to have IT governance? Probably, because we'll be looking at very large companies in this particular course. Those are the companies that you're most likely to go work for. You're very, very unlikely to go work for an organization that has no IT. If you do, I'm not sure why you came to Truman State to get the accounting degree. That's just weird. So yeah, ultimately we can say we know that the relationship exists. We know that the relationship is probably going to be consistent. We're going to see it in every one of the examples that we looked at before. All right, so now we have the IT governance framework. So we talked about the 3 IT governance frameworks: COBIT, ITIL, and ISO 27000 series. But we haven't really defined what these represent. So let's go ahead and let's get some definitions for each of these, and then let's see if we can separate out all of these. So going back I'm gonna scroll back up here. Make everybody sick because of the blurry movement. Does anybody get motion sickness by watching screen? I apologize. I'll try not to do that too much, but it can happen. All right. So I want to start with COVID, and we're going to go with this definition off the CIO Wiki. Trust me when I say that we'll have more robust definitions starting next week, actually. But I want to talk a little bit about COVID. So COVID, it's an IT governance control framework that helps organizations meet today's business challenges in the area of regulatory compliance, risk management, and aligning IT strategy with organizational goals. So regulatory compliance, risk management, aligning IT strategy with organizational goals. That seems pretty broad. What do you guys think? Seems like, okay, you haven't really told me what you do. That sounds like if I were to talk about what my resume looks like, I could probably come up with a similar definitions. Like I have experience in regulatory compliance, risk management, and aligning IT strategy with organizational goals. And then say, was your name COVID? Yeah, but doesn't really give you a lot of detail, and that's intentional. That's actually intentional because COVID is very broad by its nature. All right. COBIT's an internationally recognized framework. In particular, COBIT's management guidelines components contain framework of the controls and measurability of IT by providing tools to assess the measure of the enterprise's IT capability for the 37 identified COBIT processes. All right, you probably heard 37 processes like, oh my gosh, Dr. Barnes is going to make us learn those. It's like, no, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. Not quite that. So why did I spend the time and tedium reading through that? It's because there's a lack of definition as to what COBIT really does, because COBIT's very, very high level. We've actually experienced a very high level framework already in another course that you experienced with me. In fact, many of you in 2 courses that you experienced with me. So it's like, well, Dr. Barnes, I've had you for 2 courses recently, 367 and 417. What was one of the frameworks we talked about back in those 2 courses that was the framework that was common to those 2 courses? COSO, yeah, the COSO framework, very, very broad. Can we specifically talk about what COSO did? It's like, no, COSO doesn't actually do anything. It provides guidance on how to do things in other contexts. So when we talk about it with respect to COBIT is very, very high level. It provides a context of saying, how do we determine what needs to be done? It doesn't tell us what to do. It doesn't tell us how to do it. It tells us just basically what needs to be done. It's very, very broad. Now let's drill down a little bit further. Let's talk about ITIL. IT Infrastructure Library was developed by the UK's Cabinet Office as a library of best practice processes for IT service management. By the way, if you don't have that as part of your definition, those are the words that you need to have to remember for this definition. IT service management. Okay. And I'm not going to read the rest of the definition because that's really the most important thing to take care of. So when we talk about COBIT is very broad. It deals with a lot of different areas. It deals with risk management, regulatory compliance, IT strategy. Okay, so governance at a very, very high level. ITIL is more about a specific area of IT governance. It says, how do we provide the best services to our stakeholders? So aligning service offerings with information technology, IT service management. How does this differ from COBIT? COBIT is basically saying, all right, here's what you need to do. ITIL will tell you specifically how to accomplish that. Now, if that's the case, I defined COBIT as broad. Would we say that ITIL is nearly as broad as COBIT? Definitely not. It's definitely much more focused. It's focused on one area, IT service management. All right, ISO 27000 series, okay? Best practice standards for support for information security management in organizations. So information security management, specifically ISO 27000 series, gives you the standards for adopting an information security management system, ISMS, information security management system. So again, the differentiation there, this is something that's very, very specific and focused. It's part of the overall governance framework, but it deals with one area of governance. So when you say security, what's that 4-letter word that security generally relates to? Risk, okay? Risk was the thing we were thinking about, okay? So I think we can kind of delineate these. We can say that COBIT is more about the overall governance framework, about different areas of governance that we'd be concerned about. ITIL is most focused on delivery of value, and ISO 27002 is more focused on mitigation of risk. Now, if you didn't take that away from that, trust me when I say we'll have some opportunities to look at that further. very near future, as a matter of fact. We're going to be spending the next few weeks talking about these sets of standards, in addition to a few other standards. All right, so then I ask you to say, using the above resources, I want you to prepare your own definition for each of the 5 domains of IT governance. All right, so 5 domains of IT governance. Let's go ahead and go to that domains of IT governance and list what I have here. So they have them in different order, but I'm just going to call on what your definitions were for each of the ones that they listed here. So let's go ahead and Jordan, how did your group define strategic alignment?
We mostly just said that like it focuses on the connection between IT and enterprise operations.
So the connection between IT and enterprise operations. That's a good, succinct definition. I really like that. Well done. Okay. So yeah, strategic alignment. Basically, we want to make sure IT supports everything that the enterprise's goals are for. And say there's a lot of information that we can go into detail here, but again, I like when something is simple and to the point. Why improve upon it? So I like that definition. All right. Moving forward, Matt F., how did your group define value delivery?
Ensures that your company's not upside down on their IT systems investment, and that building up the IT systems actually provides value to the company rather than just being a money pit.
Okay, good. So we don't want to contribute excessive costs. Want to make sure that the IT generates value. IT system itself generates value. This is actually something I was talking to my AIS class about. Some of you may remember this. In my AIS course, I talked about statements on financial accounting concepts number 8. Does anybody remember that discussion? Yes, and I've locked it on my memory, Dr. Martis, yes. So SFAC number 8, I said there's a constraint to providing accounting information. What is that constraint? The benefit of the information has to exceed the cost of providing that information. Can we say value delivery is aligned with that particular concept? Yeah. If we want to make sure, I think Matt used the term upside down. It's like we don't want the overall cost to overwhelm the benefit of the values that are realized by providing information through an IT system. So the IT system itself needs to be a value generator. All right, next we got Megan. What is performance management? Okay, so monitoring the performance of the system to make sure that it's meeting its objectives. Very good. Related to that, Jenna, what is risk management?
It's how to mitigate any risks that come from the use of IT and in the management of IT governance.
Do you think resource management and risk management are related to one another? So just intuitively speaking, it sure sounds like it. They both have the word management, okay? But again, not ignoring that point, okay? Can we say that there are risks related to the use of resources within an organization? Certainly. So there's definitely going to be some overlap there. There's a reason I bring that up. I promise I'll get to that. But I wanted to bring that point up. I think, so I said performance management, and I skipped over resource management because we had performance management and resource management. So I gave you guys the 5th one. Sorry, I kind of spoiled it. So risk management and resource management. And we believe there's a relationship. So how do these relate to one another? Well, hopefully, scroll down far enough. I know it's here. Or maybe no, it's in a different piece. That's why. Boy, I would have really wasted your time if I just kind of kept going. So let's try this again. There we go. So we have this diagram right here, which I really like. So let's see if we can make that. Oh, never mind. So look at this one right here. This diagram right here. So this one kind of defines these domains as a cyclical or as a cycle or as a cyclical process. Technically speaking, I know that it's not cyclical. Cyclical is defined as circular, but you know, I don't know that there's a term called boxlical. It just doesn't make sense. So the interesting point about this is that it basically kind of follows a sequence that we're all really informed with. So we say we define what the shareholder value is, like what stakeholders want, or not shareholder, stakeholder value. And then we basically define our strategy according to that. Then basically once the strategy is defined, we can say the IT provides value by providing these tasks. It manages risks, as we know, because controls are very, very prevalent in IT. And then defines how the organization is performing based on these criteria. And we kind of review that process and start all over again and keep going around. It's the circle of IT life, and it moves us all right? Now, something that's interesting about this and something that I'm not sure how to interpret is it says that IT resource management is external to this. Now, what do you think they mean by saying IT resource management is external to this entire process? Is it something as simple that all different components are going to use resources within an organization? I think that that's probably correct. I think that's probably correct to say that all of these are going to utilize resources. So IT resource management is going to touch each one of the other domains. To that end, what did we were just talking about with respect to resource management and risk management? What did we just say? That they're related to one another? Can we make an argument that there are also risks associated with the other domains as well? So how would you prefer this to be drawn? The way that it is right now, or do you think it would be more appropriate to have risk management as an external component, something like IT resource management, and just have those three components: strategic alignment, value delivery, performance management, or performance measurement, stuff there? I don't know. There's a good example. I think just for us as human beings, we would love to have all of these contained within the same diagram. And we probably could have a diagram that has resource management contained within there as well. But the simple truth is that this is a really, really difficult concept. This is a difficult series of ideas to conceptualize that's going to be accurate, that's going to show the entire interactions within the 5 domains. So don't worry too much about the interactions of the domains. I'm not concerned about that. I'm more concerned about, do you understand why the 5 domains are relevant? And I think that that's fairly intuitive with respect to this point. And by the way, you'll notice I use that term a lot, something is intuitive. I always feel a little bit awkward when I talk about something being intuitive, because if it's intuitive, it means, why are you teaching it, Dr. Barnes? You're just wasting your time. But it's only intuitive when you actually understand the context that we're talking about. All right. Last question, and we've got a little bit of time, so I've got 7 groups to ask, okay? 7 groups to ask. In your own words, why is IT governance important? So I guess the first group gets the easy one, because you get to actually set the stage, and then if anybody repeats you, you're saying, yeah, they're just copying it. So Matt, what's your group say for this one?
IT governance places standards on IT and allows companies to understand the impacts that IT decisions have on the overall business.
Good, okay. I think that's a pretty straightforward definition. So I'm going to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to the next group, and I'm not going to necessarily ask your definition, but I'm going to say, what do you have to add to that? Okay. If you don't have anything to add to that, that's fine. Okay. I'm just going to frown at you disapprovingly. All right. Sydney, what does your group have to add to that?
The governance helps,
Sure.
without governance, organizations are not able to effectively utilize the information they have or safeguard their IT assets. It also better aligns the principal and the agent to create a group strategy.
Ooh, principal agent theory. Got that goal congruence in there. Good. All right. Holden, do your group have anything to add to that?
Yeah, ours was pretty similar to Matt's, except for we included complying with corporate governance and increasing organizational return on IT investments to achieve business goals.
Good, good. So the corporate governance is definitely something to consider, as we kind of came to the conclusion that it's impossible to not integrate those two. So having that included in there as well. Jordan, what about your group?
Not really a whole lot, mostly just that like it's important to have like the controls and policies in place, because like all businesses are using IT anymore, and like if they're not using IT, then they're kind of falling behind. So they kind of need it.
That's understated, but really important in every walk of life. Always have controls. Always have controls. Okay, always have controls, and you're going to hear me say that in every single scenario that we'll ever talk about. And then Matt F. Anything else?
Yeah, we were kind of similar to Jordan's group. You can't get away from IT, so having governance frameworks lets companies set at the very least a standard and sort of help make everything, I guess, work together a little better.
Good observation. Good. Megan, what about your group?
Like similar things, that it acts as a very strong base for organizations to ensure that companies.
Cool. All right. Jenna, anything else to add from the wrap up?
I guess we also said that it helps to ensure that like the proper use of technologies to minimize risk and maximize efficiency and value.
So the value maximization adage that we had from the very beginning, thrown back in there. Okay, good reference. I agree with that one. So we have a lot of consistency among the definitions in the class, and that's good to hear. If we had a lot of differences in the way that people are approaching this, then we probably wouldn't have a consensus as to how why IT governance is what the importance and prominence of IT governance is. I think we can come to the conclusion that in most modern organizations, IT governance is a necessary function, and it's a very, very big and important one. It's going to be maximizing value subject to risk and making sure that all the operations of the organization are aligned to provide to the organization's objectives. Got one more thing. I know it's not on the lineup, but I wanted to ask you something conceptual. Okay, so earlier we talked about the three important IT governance frameworks, and we come to the conclusion that there's a lot more than just three. There are other IT governance frameworks that we have not discussed yet. There are some that we're not going to discuss at all. But do we think that these are used in isolation? Like, do you think that a COBIT uses, or a company uses just COBIT, or just ITIL, or just ISO 27000? No. Most organizations will use multiples of these. Does that make intuitive sense to use multiple frameworks? I mean, if you have multiple frameworks, you're like, well, okay, if I have one standard here, it might interfere with another standard here, and that is definitely a risk. But why did we say, what is the intuition behind saying that we would use multiple frameworks? Well, remember why we were talking about what each framework accomplishes, and I said they focus on different things. They have different objectives. If that's the case, are they more like overlapping objectives, or are they more like puzzle pieces that fit together? Say they're more like puzzle pieces. I don't use that analogy. I actually have a video that I was going to show you, but because the speakers are not working for some reason on YouTube, I can't show the video. But the idea being is that when we think about these frameworks and we start looking at these frameworks, I don't want you to think about them in isolation, because what we're going to find out is they accomplish a lot more when used in unison with other governance frameworks. It is a lot more work and a lot more knowledge to absorb, but it ends up with a much stronger result. All right, we are done for today. We'll see you all on Monday.